All right, we are live here with Mr. Phil and Mr. Dan, and we are going to be talking about human rights and their belief systems based on where they're coming from on that aspect. And then the second part of um, our show or interview, whatever you want to call it, is going to be about their respective views on the COVID-19 crisis or non-crisis, depending on how you view it. Mr. Dan, take us away for the front end.
So we're talking about human rights. I think when we talk about human rights, one of the things that I think gets confused are what our basic human rights an individual is born with outside of what an authority grants them, and then what rights does an individual have in the society in which he lives, right? Maybe a society, civilization can decide, okay, these are the rights of this, these are the rights of the individuals that live in this society, civilized or not, right? For your basic human rights that you are born with, that no one gives you, but of course they can be taken away from you, but you are born with the right to believe whatever you want, religious beliefs, ideologies. You have a right to believe and the freedoms to believe what you want to believe. And that goes right along with speech. You have a right to say, you're born with the right of free speech. You're born with the right of liberty of thought. You are born with the right to defend yourself. You are born with the right to have your own personal property and to defend that personal property. Is there something else? I think those are it. Basically, you don't need any entity, organization, power structure to provide those rights to you. They're innate. What is the word? Inalienable.
Innate. Inalienable.
Inalienable rights, right? Nothing can. Basically, you don't need anybody to provide you those things, right?
And that's not just the USA.
That's not just the USA.
That's worldwide.
Worldwide, you don't have to take anything from anyone to have those rights. Like, you're not taking from anyone to have those rights. Those are just your rights as an individual. In any society where you have a large group of people, organized, unorganized, those rights can be dictated to you. You know, they can be granted more, they can be pulled back. The society can decide there are more rights that you have. A right of, so basically, like, you have a right to gather, right? Like, a group of people have a right to gather in a public space. You have a right to, let's say, education or healthcare, on and on and on and on and on. Societies can decide those things as they see fit, right? If the people want them.
But they're not human rights.
They're not human rights.
Okay.
Right? Human rights, you don't take from people. No one gives them to you. You're born with them. Those are your human rights. I think in our society in Canada and the United States, because those are the places I've lived, people have crossed over the two and I guess inflated the two into one, where you have rights that the state grants you, your basic human rights, and there's crossovers. And in the crossover, you see them lessening some of your basic human rights and increasing some of your other, granting you more rights, and vice versa. Right?
Okay, so, I got to ask you on that. What are some examples of stuff that they're taking away and stuff that they're adding, in your opinion?
So I think one of the big things in the United States and Canada, for instance, property rights, and I don't just mean land property or your house or your yard, intellectual property. That's like in Canada, that's been under attack, I think, for a long time. And in some states in the United States, people are having trouble with their intellectual property. I think we all know that. Intellectual property because of the internet and because of, say it, large corporations. Those are under attack, and they're not, and it's harder and harder for people to maintain some of those rights. Your freedom of expression and freedom of speech, I think of varying degrees, those are under attack. And I think
I got to interrupt you there. There's a difference between actually losing rights and them being under attack. Are there any instances where we're actually losing those rights, in your opinion, or are they just under attack?
They're being eroded. I think a lot of those are being eroded.
Okay.
Right. I forgot the right to defend. Did I mention the right to defend yourself?
You did, yes.
Mm-hmm. We don't have that in Canada, right? Like we don't have that. We don't have that in Canada. So
you can't take the other person's life if you're being attacked, or you can't defend yourself at all.
If you're being attacked, it is in the court of law. It's very, if you kill someone defending yourself on your property, you can go to prison up here. You don't have that right.
Right. That's killing them. Like defending yourself. You mean defending yourself to the death?
Yes.
I just needed to clarify that. Okay. Anything else you want to add to that?
I think I laid it out.
Okay, cool. We'll have you follow up here in a second. Phil?
Yeah. Okay, so it doesn't sound like Dan and I are all that far apart on what we view rights as, what we look at as rights. The difference that he and I would have is he's differentiating between a right that someone's born with and a right which a government grants. And I don't make that distinction, and here's why. I wish I could remember the name of the 18th century philosopher who said this, but I can repeat what he said. He said, he said, self-interest and self-interest alone is the basis for human rights. And that kind of goes along the theme of my idea, or the idea that I hold, that Sam Harris and others have advanced, that well-being is the foundation, or should be the foundation for morality and rights and those kinds of things. So, my question to Dan would be, when you say that you're born with a right, how do you demonstrate that you're born with it? And my position is, I don't think you can demonstrate that we're born with some rights and not others, because in my opinion, all rights come from our self-interest. And where we develop rights as a socially as a community is where our self-interest meets. So all it takes is for me and one other person to establish what is in our self-interest and work out a mutual agreement. And that's how basic rights are formed.
But I'm sorry, Philip, let me interrupt you really quick. One could argue that slave owners, their self-interest was to own slaves, and that benefited them greatly, right? But that wasn't in the best interest of the well-being of the people that they were taking advantage of. So is self-interest really enough?
Yeah. So when you're trying to decide between, if it's just you, if you're the only human being on the planet, you can give yourself whatever rights or deny yourself of any rights that you want. But it's when you come in contact with another human being is when you have to have that discussion of what rights would I want to be afforded if I was the other guy. That's what you have to establish, and that's how you have to look at rights. You have to look at it from the standpoint, if you were the most disenfranchised human being on in the world, what would, you know, what rights would you want to afford that person if your circumstances should become theirs? And I think when two people look at it that way, that at any point they could each switch places, and you have a conversation about rights in that framework, then you can work out an equitable situation.
Okay. When we're talking about healthcare, you know, some people in the United States say, you know, healthcare is a basic human right.
Yes.
That I think that's where you and Dan have different viewpoints, because
Right.
He would say that it's not a human right, and you would say it is. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So, in my opinion, why it is a basic human right is it goes back to what I just explained. Is that if I found myself in the worst of financial positions, what would I want afforded to me? It goes back to that idea of it's not just my self-interest in the present that I'm looking out for, but it's my future self-interest that I'm looking out for. So it's my future self of being disenfranchised or being poor or being in need. So today I'm not in need, but maybe tomorrow I will be. So what rights would I want afforded to me? And
but wouldn't you have to have somebody else supply that care to you? And so it's not just you having the right to it, it's now making somebody else provide you something. Like the right in and of itself might be true, but now you're making somebody else do something for you.
well, that's a social contract that we agree to, is that we pool resources to provide a social net for each other, and that is in our own best interest to do that. That is if I was a billionaire, that would be in my best interest to part with a certain amount of my wealth to provide something that I would want should I lose all my billions. If I lost everything, if I wasn't a billionaire at some point in the future, what kind of care would I want? And so I think a wise society, provides those things in its own self-interest. It comes back to that idea of well-being and self-interest. And so for me, logically, that is the only basis for human rights. To just say you're born with something is an assertion without proof. I have yet to hear proof of how a person can be born with a right. There needs to be a framework, a logical framework demonstrating.
Well, you would agree that, and Dan, I'm going to get to you in 1 second. I want to hear your response, but you would agree, Phil, that no one has the right to take your life. That's not something that you're just born with?
No, you have to demonstrate that. Look at the animal world. I believe that we're all animals, right? We all genetically come from a common ancestor, and we don't impose these rights on the animal kingdom. A leopard can go and catch a domesticated dog and kill it without any repercussions, unless, it's encroaching on a society that imposes its will on it. There's nothing immoral. There's nothing immoral about a leopard killing a domesticated dog. You could say the same thing about a person. It's only what makes it wrong to kill another person is that we've decided that it's not in our self-interest to allow that to happen because I don't want to be killed. So if I don't want to be killed, I don't want you to be killed because that sets a precedent for me to be killed.
Okay, that makes sense. Dan, will you respond?
Yeah, that is, so one of the things that Phil is talking about, that I'm talking about, these aren't new ideas. These are 1,000-year-old philosophical ideas. And Phil's idea what he's explaining. I don't remember who came up with that, but in the West, that idea was it lost. And I told you this before, Ryan. These aren't new ideas, and what Phil is basically laying out is what you saw grow in Western Europe and then spread across Asia, was that exact self-interest right. But the why that falls apart, and it's a very logical progression. The larger group of people is going to decide what the rights are, right? In their best self-interest in the society. So if you have 10 people and they decide that you don't have a right to your property, they're going to decide, well, we have a right to your property, and they're going to take it, right?
But isn't that exactly what happened in our country? We disenfranchised people that were the minorities, and
Well,
in Europe, you know, they seem to have less of that today than here.
Well, they had imperial systems in Europe where the kings would decide what people's rights were.
Right. I mean, now though,
the king had all the rights, and the other people didn't have as many rights.
Agreed.
Right? So what Phil is laying out does exist and has existed for thousands of years. It's basically, so he gave an example of two people, like there's only one person on Earth, and then there's another person, he runs into another person. Well, the way they're going to decide what their rights are is the stronger person is going to decide what the rights are, right?
No,
How that will work.
absolutely not.
That is how that will work, because if there's a disagreement, so here's where it falls apart, Phil. If there's one person and he meets up with two people who are joined together and they are stronger than this guy is, who's going to dictate what the rights are? The two people are going to dictate what the rights are. The way I'm stating it is, if this guy comes up against two people, that's still going to happen. But they're going to tell him, hey, you don't have a right to whatever it might be. And he's born with the right to fight and defend himself against, maybe they're going to try to take something from him or decide that he doesn't have a right to, like, you can only keep half your crop because there's only one of you and there's two of us, so we get the rest of your crop. That's how humans act. That's why the United States has set up, that's why the United States set up the system they set up, so that sort of thing can't happen. What you're laying out works if everyone is agreeable, and let's just say they're all saints. It doesn't work when you have individuals who have more power, selfish, they don't have the best interest of others in mind. It always falls apart, Phil. That's why I don't agree with it.
Okay, so go ahead.
It's no different though. I mean, we see the same thing playing out even in societies where you have like a theocracy, where their morals or their ethics or their laws are derived from what they believe is bestowed upon them by a higher power. You still see those inequalities. You still see the might makes right people coming along and doing their thing. So I don't see that you are offering any better position. What I'm saying is, if you're dealing with logical people in a civilized society, not in a barbaric society where you're talking about 10,000 BC and you're fighting with your neighbor and the saber-toothed tiger next door, and you have no understanding of civil rights. You have no understanding. You're barely conscious at that point as a human being, because all you're doing is surviving. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people that are well developed psychologically and emotionally.
There's no examples of this. What you're stating, there's no examples of this working in our modern society. Like in the turn of the industrial age, there's no examples of it, right? We've had countries that do it and they fall apart, right? So you have to give me an example of this working and continually working in a place where it hasn't completely collapsed in on itself, because we've had plenty of countries do this, and it always.
I don't think we've ever seen a country that adopts secular humanism as its core functioning principles. All these Eastern Bloc countries that we've seen, institute communism and all these things. They're highly hierarchical. They're into leader worship. You have a dictator at the top telling how everybody's going to do things. I'm not talking about that at all. But you are right. We haven't seen a society that's purely constructed off of humanistic ideals. But I'm proposing that from a logical basis, it is the best basis to ensure rights across the board. Just declaring someone to have certain rights and not others is actually a limiting factor.
You're not declaring those, because if you kill somebody, you go to jail.
Well, no, it's not just that, Ryan. You don't just declare it. You give the people the ability to maintain their rights, right? By it's if you read the United States Bill of Rights, basically lays out how that works, right? And it's a kind of a logical progression of that. You give the people the ability to maintain those rights. So it's not just that you state that they have them. Now you have the ability to maintain them and try to keep them from being eroded. There's a reason why the United States, and I'm not saying that the United States is special or anything, but the people who put this system in place knew what they were doing, and they knew once they got that system up and running, it would be hard to destroy it, because they put a lot of power in the population, and it's not that top-down sort of thing.
Dan, I agree with you to a point, but we still see incredible inequality in our system and in other systems. So
it's run by humans. That's why it's not perfect, but it's one of the best systems ever created.
No, right. But when it comes to rights, though, I'm saying, if your way is so superior, why don't you see a more utopian society than we have compared to other countries? We're the most unequal first world country in the world.
There's lots of factors that go into that. Here's the point. In the US, the United States, you can, to a certain extent, buy a house or an acreage, and you can keep that. The state can't come outside of you selling drugs, or you have kids buried in the backyard. They can't come and take that property away from you, right? They can't do it. It's yours. You can defend it. That is an outlier. That's not just everywhere in the world, right? And I think people think that that's everywhere. It's actually pretty rare.
Okay.
Right?
Go ahead, Phil.
The problem is, as I see it, is that you have to have a framework by which rights can grow and expand. You have to have a logical framework by which that happens. And by just saying that people have certain rights and not others, it's a limiting framework. It's not a methodology to expanding people's rights. The methodology that I'm espousing is a method for expanding of what we see as human rights. And I see what you're espousing is more regressive and not progressive, because there's no way to move forward in expanding rights. There's no logical basis.
It's true. That's true, Phil. It is more limiting, but the difference is it stays the way it is. Yours can go way that way, or it can go way that way, depending on the population, right? It really does depend on the population. If you live in a pure democracy, that's what your rights depend on.
Is he saying? But Dan, is he saying that just because he believes in these rights that he believes in a pure democracy where the majority rule?
That's not what
what
he's
he's
saying.
saying?
That's
Okay.
not what he's saying. Basically the civilized society are going to decide what your rights are, and those rights can expand, and those rights you can have more rights, right? Education, healthcare. You can have a right to a house, right? Like you can have a right to a house. Everyone can have a right to a car. Everyone can have a right to a basic universal income. What I'm saying is, it could in that system, it could also go the other way. You could have no rights to anything. That's the risk. That's why it. That's why, man. That's the risk you would be taking in a system like that, unless you had the foundation. The foundational rights is okay. Here are your basic rights, and then we can kind of grow from there. But you can't just lose all your rights. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Well, if you use the measuring stick of well-being as being the basis for morality and human rights, if you're defining well-being, you basically can't fall below a certain standard of living. If we define in the 21st century that this is what well-being looks like to us in Western civilization, and that is the bottom from which we work for. That is the bottom ethos. That is the bottom of our understanding is well-being. That is the basis of morality. That's the basis of ethics. That's the basis of human rights. Well-being. It really can't go the other. It can't go the other way if you have well-being and self-interest as the heart of your as the prime mover.
Guys, I want to give you guys an example, and I want you both to comment on it, and then we'll move on. The story of the Good Samaritan. Someone's dying in the street, and you are on your way to work. Do you have a moral obligation to help them? And if you do, is that an argument for the right to have health care? Dan?
You have a moral obligation to help someone like that in need, in my belief system, right? It's not a right. It's not an argument for a right for health care, right? I don't know how to jump from that. I don't know how to jump from that to healthcare or to bridge that, right? I understand what you're trying to say. I wouldn't be against the society deciding that, you know what, people need healthcare and it should be accessible to everyone who lives in this society. The only issue I have, the libertarian in me just says, well, now you're forcing people to provide the care. And I know you're not forcing people to provide the care, because people go into those industries of their own free choice, and they work and they get paid. It's just the whole, if there's not enough service and it's a right, people have to be, you have to consign.
But I mean, you could say the same thing about the military, Dan. You could say, hey, there's all these people that are protecting us. If they all just resigned, then hey, Dan, it's your turn to come to the front line. Sorry, buddy.
We have in the United States, because some countries actually agree with you, Ryan. Some countries agree with you. You have a right to form a militia, and the militia can take care of that for you, right? So in the United States, no, you're not supposed. That's not supposed to happen, right? If no one wants to join the military, well, then people form militias. Technically speaking.
Well, I thought they had a draft when they needed more people.
Well, I think we've only had drafts twice in the United States.
Right, but it still happened.
It happens, yeah. Which it's
And
not.
that's force, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I completely disagree with that. I don't think that's right.
And we'd be speaking German. We'd be speaking German or Japanese if we followed that to its logical conclusion. I think it goes back to the idea that, as a society, we decide what is in our well-being. And going back to what Ryan just asked you, about healthcare and the Good Samaritan idea. No, it's not a moral obligation for me to help the guy, on the side of the road. But as a secular humanist, why would I help the guy on the side of the road? The reason I would do it is because one day I might be that guy sitting on the side of the road. So that's why I would want to help that guy, because what would I want done to me in that situation? That is my modus operandi.
But should it be a law?
No,
Okay.
no, it shouldn't be a law. And going to the healthcare debate, the question for me would be, would I rather live in a society that was completely libertarian, where you had, anybody could choose what they wanted to do, and they could get as sick as they wanted, they could get as mentally imbalanced as they wanted? Is that better for me? Is it good for me to have someone who's mentally imbalanced, or has a substance abuse problem, or doesn't have the funds to live? Is that in my best interest to be living next door to that? No, it's not. It's in my best interest to live next to someone who's having their monetary needs met, their emotional needs met, their physical needs met, their health needs met. That is in my best interest. That makes my life easier. And I think people, underestimate the power of that.
Good stuff.
I don't underestimate it. I just know it can go both ways. Like, it can go in a very noble way, like what you're speaking, but it can go the exact opposite direction of that.
Not if you have the right foundation, not if you have the right logical framework. If a society adopts the framework that our human rights are based on well-being and self-interest, you can't really go wrong with that. Because if you have to take the other person's well-being into account, the worst off and the most well-off well-being into account, and construct laws based on that well-being, which is based on self-interest. I have an interest in well-being because it's in my self-interest. Why do I have self-interest? Is because I can demonstrate I'm born with that. You can't demonstrate you're born with human rights, but you can demonstrate that you're born with self-interest and well-being as something that humans want.
Phil, what happens when both groups believe that they both have this well-being in mind? Because like in the 40s, the United States felt that their safety was impaired by Japanese Americans. And so they put them in camps.
The answer is the larger group decides, Ryan, and that's how it always goes. That in that system, the larger group decides what the best
That's what happens, or that's what's right?
No,
that's what happens.
Those are different questions.
That's not what I'm arguing for. The largest group doesn't decide. It's what is the decider is the principles. And the principle is well-being and self-interest.
That's what I wanted to ask you, Phil. Let me interrupt you real quick, because if the non-Japanese Americans believed that everyone's well-being was better because Japanese Americans were in camps, and the Japanese Americans believed that their well-being was better to be free, like they both believe that. Like, where is the answer?
I'm not saying this is a perfect framework. The point is that what humans understood as well-being has grown over time. That has grown from 1000 BC to 1000 AD to 2000 AD. We have a different understanding of what well-being is. We have more knowledge because of our scientific endeavors of what well-being is, because of our understanding of sociology and psychology. We have a better understanding of what well-being means. So with the framework that I am calling for, is it takes the lessons of the past and what we learn in the present and brings that into the future to where it becomes more informed as you move throughout time. Will it be perfect? No, but it'll be better than the alternative.
Dan, can you give us the last word on that?
I'm trying to figure out how to articulate this. What you inevitably end up with is that philosophy has led to things like, eugenics, right?
No, not that philosophy. No, you're confusing the basis. What has caused eugenics? It's not what I'm talking about. No, that's wrong.
It's the same basics of human self-interest, right? There's an economic philosophy for this too. Isn't it the same when there's a hurricane and the gas stations, instead of lowering prices, if they lower their prices when people are trying to evacuate during a hurricane, they'll run out of gas, right? So if they increase prices, they jack the prices up, let only the people who actually need the gas will go to the gas station to buy, and then they won't run out of gas. That's in the same philosophical framework. So the gas station people are looking out for their best interests, but it just so happens their best interest is better for the people at large because they won't run out of gas as quickly. You follow that, and here's the thing: if you keep following that mindset, that person who Ryan's the story of the Good Samaritan, that person on the side of the road doesn't necessarily get help because that's not in anyone's best interest that guy gets helped. What's in the best interest is either he stays there or he's done away with. That's actually in everyone's best self-interest. Yes, it is. That's where it goes, Phil.
Nobody wants to live in that. No one wants to live in that world.
But
no one in the 21st century wants to live in that world.
In the year 3000, what's going to be in everyone's best interest is if we don't have any sick people, we don't have any people with mental health issues.
Yes, that's correct. But how do you get there? You don't get there by getting rid of those people. You get there through innovation. So you're creating a dystopia that doesn't need to exist. You're setting up a dystopia that doesn't need to happen.
Okay. What's human nature? Human nature doesn't. The reason why I say the system that I mentioned is first because it disrupts human nature. It puts a wrench in the wheel and stops human nature from just rolling on.
It really doesn't. It really doesn't. History has shown that it doesn't.
It slows it down, Phil. The United States didn't start off perfect, but the system that they started, which they adopted in England and Great Britain as well, caused the societies to grow at such a rapid rate that no one had ever really seen before. And then, yes, it starts to erode and it's not perfect and things start to fall apart. But that's the system we should work off of because that's the system where everybody has the most amount of rights, and the rights can't be, they're not supposed to be, you can't take them away. You can, but it's much more difficult to lose your rights and to have those taken away.
But it's ultimately a straitjacket, though, because the rights that were developed in 1775 or whenever, even Jefferson, said about the Constitution that it has to continually be amended. It has to continually be changed. Otherwise, you have a boy that grows into a man and he's forced to wear the boy's coat. Mm-hmm. That would be the Constitution, and you can't have that. So, what framework do you have to develop in order to that you can have a coat that you can grow into? And I'm saying that the philosophy that I'm espousing is the only one that gives you a framework to grow in. anything else is arbitrary. Just saying you have this right here, you have this right here, and you don't have a framework to establish the right, you end up in despotism, or you end up being cramped and stifled and not being able to grow as much as you could.
Dan, I want to use the example of Norway. Okay, I don't think that they're perfect. Okay, but to your point, they probably have less rights as far as like property and to defend yourself and things of that nature than the U.S., right? But they also have extremely low crime, extremely low poverty, and extremely high, healthy, educated society. I know that they're a homogenous group and very small nation, so that makes that easier, right? And they have a lot of immigration or illegal immigration, things of that nature. So I know it's not perfect, but you could argue that, hey, this society looks out for everybody and their quality of life is so much higher compared to the US for everybody. Isn't that kind of the goal that we want? Not that everyone is equal, but everybody has a higher standard.
Yeah, that's the goal. That's the goal, is that everyone has a very high standard of living, right? I guess just how you get, like Norway got there, how you get there, I guess is what we're disagreeing on. Norway, there's a lot of economic things that go into why Norway can do those things,
course,
right?
Of course.
We don't get into, I guess.
Right.
But one of the things in terms of Norway or Sweden, or what's the other one up there? Finland. It is the way it is now, but it started off, the foundation was free market capitalism that got it to this point, and then they built this system on top of that, right? But it's not perfect, what I'm saying. It's just the most protected, right? With all its flaws, your rights are the most protected. It's very hard for a group to come along and then just take them away from you. It can happen. It's just way harder to happen, right?
All right, well, let's leave it at that. For that topic, we're going to change gears a little bit and talk about COVID-19 and both of your views on not only the virus itself, but the response to it. And I would like Dan to start on this as well.
What's the question?
I want you to talk about how bad it is compared to what the media is portraying it to be, if it's accurate, the death tolls, and then also the response by our administration, and anything else you want to add that you think differently than what other people might.
Well, okay, there's a few things here. COVID, at the beginning of 2020, we did not have all the information about COVID, obviously, right? So throughout the year, by November, we have way more information about the virus. The death rates, I don't have to go through those numbers. They're all out there. We know what the death rates are now. United States and a lot of other free societies copied China in their response, right? China, a communist dictatorship, had a response to a virus they didn't fully understand. And then the United States, Canada, Germany, France, Spain, Italy, they all copied China, which is incredible in itself, right? China locked its population down because it's China. They can do that. They locked down their population. Of course they did. United States and the rest of these countries don't follow China's game plan for dealing with a virus by locking down their population.
But they did.
I know they did, which was wrong. That's not the way that was wrong. Right? They don't.
Then why do we see China with such low rates compared to us right now?
So we have no idea what the rates are in China. We have to
Correct.
go by what China tells us the rates are.
Correct.
Second of all, there was no legislation no vote from the House, no Supreme Court ruling. The states just, with authority, locked people down, dictated to the population who the essential workers were and who the essential workers weren't. And it's basically, these countries acted like a dictatorship. And what it told me was that we don't actually have any rights in the United States. It's all paper.
Wait, isn't it in the Constitution that the president can declare martial law and then take away certain rights temporarily?
He didn't declare martial law.
I know, but I'm not saying that he did, but if that is in the Constitution, then wouldn't you be able to argue that, hey, a huge scenario is happening, and so different rules apply during that period? Just like during 9/11.
He did. There has to. So during 9/11, there was an executive order, and then the House had to go along and vote all that in there. None of that happened this time. There was no vote. Nothing was voted on or ruled on. It just happened like that. That was shocking to me, right? At the time, I'm thinking, okay, whatever, right? It happens in Canada. It's happening all over. Extremely shocking, right? The other shocking thing was there was hardly any pushback on it, which I knew right away. I said, okay, we're in trouble, right? However bad this virus is, this is bad. But here we are, right? The other thing is, now that we have all the information, up here where I am, in certain states where you guys are, they still have us under all these restrictions. And still, there hasn't been any vote, ruling, executive order, nothing. We're just being locked down by fiat. They're just you're locked down, right?
So if you had an order, you'd feel more okay with it.
If my ruling class officials locked me down, I would not feel okay with it.
I said more okay with it.
Probably not.
Because in our country, we have mandates.
Yes.
In different states,
and
you don't get arrested for it. You get asked to leave a restaurant, or you get a fine or something of that nature, right? It's not. Yeah. You're not going to jail for criminal. Some
states, I think that did happen. I think that was happening in Michigan.
I'm not aware of that. I don't want to say that it didn't happen, but I'm not aware of a single case.
I think that happened in Michigan a few times, and I think that happened in New York State a few times. The other thing is, I think COVID-19 has turned into Islamic terrorism that we had in the 2000s. Now it's a never-ending, ongoing, no solution, no issues, and we're going to come up with all the solutions and ways to keep you safe. There's a terrorist hiding under your bed. What about the Walmart? Oh my God, the school, we have to protect the children. Terrorism. Here we go again, right? It all sounds the same to me. I might be wrong, but it all sounds the same to me. And I think here we are again, right? We're going to lose even more of our rights because of COVID.
But isn't there that whole idea that you and I have talked about before, where your rights end where my right for safety begins? So you wouldn't like, if you were my next door neighbor, you wouldn't like me to blast my music at 120 decibels all night long. I'm in my property, Dan. I'm on my property, but I'm negatively affecting your ability to live your life peacefully and have a good night's sleep, right? If I wanted to blast my music in my house and you couldn't hear it, that's different. So someone could argue that, hey, if you don't want to wear a mask in your house, that's fine. If you don't, but if you go outside and you're in a close proximity to me, and there's a deadly virus that is spread easily through just breathing, your right ends where the ability to infect me starts. So it's not just you anymore, it's everybody.
Sure.
You're about that whole rights versus my rights ending scenario. So when the government says hey, you got to lock down, or you got to wear a mask in public, or you have to social distance. Aren't they protecting the rights of the other person as well? It's not just taking away yours, it's protecting theirs too.
Yes, if it was that's true. That's why they have issued all of these mandates and things like that. How deadly is the virus? I think it gets really dangerous. It gets really dangerous when it's all about, okay, now it's safety, safety, safety. You can get people to do anything you want in the name of safety. And it's much easier to get these things done when the people are begging for it. It always is, right? If they're asking for it, hey, let's give it to them. You know what I mean? So yeah, of course you're right, and that's what people are asking for, which makes it a lot easier.
But you said they're taking away our rights. So if you agree with me that they're also protecting other people's rights, which is it? And can it be both?
Ryan, it can be both. I don't trust, and neither should anyone, really trust the people in charge. The communication we were getting from the administration, people in his own administration, different state governors are saying all sorts of different things. I don't trust the people in charge. When you just grant people kingly powers, most of the time it goes bad. And
that's how our Constitution is founded. We elect people to represent us.
Yes, but they don't. They're not. They're not kings. They're right. Not. He's not an emperor. They're not emperors. He's not emperor of Tennessee. Right? He's a governor.
Yeah, but we're not going to be able to vote. What do you think should be the law, or not the law, but the temporary solution for COVID in our?
No, absolutely not. But it was very. I think by the middle of the summer, we realized, okay, this virus isn't as deadly as we initially thought, right? So those are my thoughts on it. Those are my thoughts.
Phil, I want your response, and in addition to your response, your own thoughts.
Yeah, I want to highlight something Dan said earlier. I think it's the most brilliant thing I've heard in quite a while, actually. I had never heard anybody compare our dealing with COVID as how we dealt with terrorism. I think that is
Isn't it the same?
I think that's a beautiful analogy. That's just completely brilliant.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I mean it's true. So what I want to say about that. So to give a little bit of perspective where I'm coming from is I just started did I lose you guys?
No. Keep talking. I just got to turn my camera off for 1 second.
Okay. So, several months ago, I became an infectious disease investigator. So I deal with COVID every day. And so I get to hear the stories of, people that have been infected and affected by it. And like Dan says, it's not as deadly as, we feared it might be. I think the problem began before COVID came to our shores. The problem, I think, started, maybe even before Trump, but certainly Trump played a huge hand in, disbanding a lot of the pandemic research in the CDC, and I think that crippled some of our ability to respond to it in the right way. So instead of responding to COVID how we should have, we responded to it like we do with terrorism. We just throw bombs at it. We just go guns blazing without understanding the roots of the problem, what's really going on. So in my opinion, what should have happened, instead of, shutting down the country and pilfering the treasury, and killing small businesses and all this, I think all that needed to be done was for our leaders to say, okay, this disease is it appears to be more infectious than anything that we've seen before. I mean, more infectious than the flu. So everybody needs to wear masks, and we're going to send masks to every home, and and take care of it that way. Social distancing. We didn't have a clear message. There was no clear message on what we should do from the beginning. Like Dan said, we followed China's lead and just locked everything down, and we crushed the economy. And we found that to be so distasteful and ruinous that we opened it back up, but we didn't have a plan for keeping people safe. So it's been this trial and error, blind leading the blind approach to this issue. So yes, people are dying. I've talked to people in the hospital. I've talked to families who are expecting loved ones to leave the hospital. Yes, that's happening, and it's happening in greater numbers than we see with the flu. It's about triple those numbers, if not more, maybe almost quadruple those numbers. But it affects a certain segment of the population, healthy adults by and large, and I talk to them every day. They basically report a convenience that's no worse than either the common cold or a light flu, or even a heavy flu. I guess, in some instances it's more like a severe flu. But and then some people aren't, they're not symptomatic at all. So I think we've gone into overkill without taking the measures that we needed to truly keep people safe. And I think that's the problem. We've had a lack of leadership. We've had an unscientific approach to the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And COVID's been used as a political pawn.
Yes.
And it's cost lives. So what kind of society do I want to live in? I want to live in a society that cares about whether an elderly person dies of COVID. I don't want to live in a society that says, well, yeah, it's not that bad for young people, but it kills a lot of old people and obese people. Do I want to live in a society that says that's acceptable? No, I do not. But is absolute lockdown the answer? No, it's not the answer. A scientific approach to dealing with infectious disease is the answer. And I don't think you need to use brute force to do that. I mean, I talk to these people in Nebraska all day long, and these people are the salt of the earth. It's largely a red state, and by far 99% of the people I talk to on the phone they're happy to do whatever we tell them to do. They're happy to wear masks. They're happy to stay at home.
Dan doesn't like hearing that.
I wear masks.
No. Doing whatever we tell them to do. That's
fine.
And I tell some of these people, I thank them. I said, you know what, what I'm doing right now, I know it's really invasive. I'm asking you a lot of personal information. You're giving me a lot of personal detail that the government's keeping on you. And I appreciate you doing this for the health and safety of your fellow citizens. And, I'm really encouraged by their willingness to do whatever it takes to keep themselves and others safe. And I feel like that should be rewarded. That should be backed up by the government. And any safe nets that we have should be to encourage people to continue that behavior, not punish them. And it kills me when I have to tell a single mother who has a job, that I tell her that our recommendations are for her to stay home for another 14 days. Actually, to stay home for 10 days because her child has COVID, and her quarantine can't start until her 14-day quarantine can't start till her child's 10-day has ended.
We do the same thing here.
So
And
it's a double
it's
double
yeah,
whammy.
yeah, and so it's wrecking people financially. And so what are we doing to support these people who
Because
want
there's no
to follow?
guaranteed paid time off in this country.
Right. So what are we doing to support people that want to do what's best to deal with COVID? We're not helping them. We're shutting down businesses. We're giving billions to Wall Street, into the banks, and I think I see Dan's head nodding. I can't see him, but
Yeah, I am. Nodding, yeah.
So I think Dan and I are in agreement on this.
Yeah,
one.
I got to give you some pushback because what we know, to Dan's point, what we know now about the virus is different than what we knew in March. Okay, and
but not significantly enough.
Yeah.
Well,
not enough to change what we not enough to the response was still horrendous.
Exactly.
What we had in March.
Well,
it was horrendous.
But the thing is this: when anything that you've never encountered before that's killing tons of people, you say time out and you stop everything, and then you start going through a plan. To Phil's point, we didn't have a plan, right? I don't have a problem that we were locked down for a time, okay? But let's use the sports analogy, okay? If your guy in basketball is in the backcourt and there's 5 guys trapping one guy, you're gonna call a timeout. You need it to stop. You need everything to stop, and then you go to the huddle and you make a game plan. We didn't have a game plan at all, but we should have stopped and locked down maybe for a much shorter period, and then gone through, like Phil was saying, the mask and the social distancing. I don't like how long we were shut down, and I don't like that we were shut down in every aspect.
Trump
shutting
knew
it down. It's in itself, I don't think was wrong.
Trump knew in January how bad this thing was.
Right.
And we didn't see a shutdown till late March or early April. I mean, that's a long time to have a game plan. I don't think we needed to shut down. What we shouldn't have done is we shouldn't have allowed cruise ships full of COVID-19 patients on our shores. We should have stopped all travel from China. We didn't do that, even though Trump likes to say that.
Right, he likes to say that he did, but
he stopped Chinese national travel.
40,000 Americans came back.
Right. So so there were so many missteps early on that we could have saved ourselves tens of thousands of lives just doing the basic common knowledge stuff. And what happened is we didn't let the scientists lead on this. We let the politicians lead, and that's what got us into trouble.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. The politicians took the lead, and they conducted a power grab. That's what they did. Authority
Exactly.
didn't have. What were you saying, Phil?
Exactly, 100%.
Yeah. Authority they didn't have, and they took that opportunity. There was, I don't remember the number. I looked at this a few weeks ago. Trillions of dollars. No, not trillions. I think it was trillions of dollars, but a very high percentage of money changed hands during this year, from middle class to that 1%.
Oh, they've made more than they made all last year in 6 months of the pandemic.
Yeah.
So much money has changed hands because of the lockdowns, the buying up of assets, the cutting of being able to operate their businesses on these low, not having to pay a lot of labor, the government subsidizing these giant corporations massively and them still laying off people, right? But still getting to run their business, but also getting money and then laying people off anyway. All that money changed hands. That's why these types of things shouldn't be allowed to happen, because this is what happens every single time,
Yeah.
right? This
Did
is
you know
always
that
what happens
80% of the CARES Act money went to millionaires and billionaires,
because
and
they applied for it. They
and they
applied
were
for
okay,
it. Yeah,
but I think it should go to the regular people, the
of
majority,
course it should have. Of
and to
course.
small businesses. Um, the other thing is that they were allowed to claim losses from previous time, from last year, that had nothing to do with COVID in that law. So billionaires and millionaires were able to save even more money in tax write-offs because they got to claim that they lost money, and that like blew me away when I saw that as part of the CARES Act.
Damn it, we're agreeing again. This is unwatchable.
Well, look, it's, look. As I've talked with people, Canadians obviously have a very, very different view than I do on a lot of these things. But one thing they do agree with is the lockdown. They didn't agree with it at the time. They don't agree with it now. And we might be going into another lockdown up here, right? We are restricted on the amount of people we can have in our homes. Like we can have our immediate families plus 6, and that's probably going to go down as winter progresses, right? And even Canadians are like, that's not right. Like, you can't tell me how many people we can have in our houses. You know what I mean? And you'll get fined. Like, the bylaw officers will come, and you'll get
Really?
fined.
I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
You'll
But
get
they say it like that, Dan. They're just like, oh shucks, that's not right.
And this is, and that doesn't need to happen that way. All that needs to happen is you say, okay, you can have as many people over as you want. You just have to mask up, socially distance, and you have to have a registry.
But you can't enforce that.
No, you just have to ask people on the honor system, and you'd be surprised. You'll be surprised how many people comply
You need
with
to come to Tennessee because you wouldn't be surprised.
Well, when people start getting sick, you'll be surprised how fast people go from red to blue.
I wish Trump was the same way. I wish Trump was the same way because he got sick and it emboldened him even more and his followers. You know,
because it's like Phil said, if you're a relatively healthy person, it's going to roll off your back, right?
But that's the thing. That's the thing, Dan. You can, and I've told you this from day one. You can take it home and give it to your elderly father,
well, that's the thing, Ryan.
And so it's not just about me and me surviving. And what we're also finding out is that many people who had COVID have lasting effects, and it damages their lungs and their heart and their kidneys and their mental fatigue. And
I know, but
so I categorically reject making it about, oh, I had the severe flu and I'm better now.
No, Ryan, that's because you always make it the hypothetical worst case scenario.
It's not a hypothetical.
No, it is a hypothetical. The scenario is you have elderly grandparents. You stay away from your elderly grandparents. You're not going to work.
If you live with them.
That's where the government comes in.
Then you have to be careful, right? If you live with your grandparents, you have to be careful. That's what I'm saying. So your neighbors next door don't have to abide by the same rules that you have to. And that's where you and I disagree. 2 young people and a kid lives next door. You and your wife lives with her parents in your house. You guys have to carry yourselves completely different than those people have to.
I don't necessarily disagree with that.
Let me jump.
Go ahead, Phil.
So here's a solution. So if you live with your elderly grandmother, and you have, COVID, or you're suspected to have it, the state of Nebraska, their health department, some of them, they will offer housing to people that can't afford they don't have the means to self-isolate. So they'll put them in a house where they can isolate.
Socialism.
So instead of making a law saying you can't see certain people or you get fined, instead of approaching it that way, just provide the means for people to do what you want them to do.
I don't have a problem with that. What makes me angry is every day you know, and I work in a hospital environment, and obviously there on private property, everyone has to wear a mask. But when I go to the supermarket and when I go to other locations, it's just half the people aren't even wearing masks. And
But are you wearing a mask?
always.
So what's the problem? See, that's the mentality I don't like, Ryan.
Dan.
I'm wearing a mask. No, I'm wearing a
You
mask.
understand how it works if you said that.
No, I'm wearing a mask. I'm okay. That
No.
guy's not wearing a mask. Okay, fine.
No. Dan, I wear it for you and you wear it for me.
Yes, but the difference between you and I is I'm okay wearing it. I'm also okay with that guy not wearing it because I'm wearing one.
That's not how it works.
What do you mean that's not how it works?
Because and this is what happens in Tennessee too. People say the same thing because they don't understand it. You wear the mask for me and I wear it for you. It's the exact opposite of.
I understand that.
No,
that's fine. That is fine.
You said
what I'm saying,
I'm wearing a mask, so I'm okay, and that's not how it works.
Why isn't that how it works?
Because
Wow.
Phil, am I misunderstanding?
And I honestly am not making fun of you or putting you down. I'm just
like what I'm trying to say to Ryan is if I'm the only so if there's a room of 20 people and they're all wearing a mask and I walk into that room, they're all fine.
No,
they're fine.
No, that's
not how it works. That's not how it works. It's the exact opposite of every way that you've ever worn a mask before. Let's say we're painting and it's heavy chemicals, right? You wear a mask to protect you, right? And that's how we've always believed it. But this virus, you wear the mask so that the particles that are huge with the virus attached to them don't come out of your mouth to infect me, okay? And I wear the mask so the particles don't come out to infect you. If you are just talking without a mask and I have one on, it's extremely easy for it to get into the mask because it's not airtight. It's very hard for it to come out because it goes right into the mask. And that's another reason, and I'm not putting you down, Dan, it's just the lack of knowledge for all of this all over our country is astounding to me because it's part of leadership because it's been politicized instead of the scientists, and that's what makes me mad. If it would only bother you, Dan, and we've talked about this millions of times too. If you were doing something that could only hurt you, I'm gonna feel bad for you, but I'm not gonna be mad at you, right? But when you're doing something that can affect me or my elderly father that I live with, that's where I have the problem, and it makes me extremely angry, and it makes me extremely frustrated because other people don't. To me, when I see them without a mask, I say, "Oh, you don't care about me. You don't care."
Yeah, that's not. Yeah,
you don't care about me.
Yeah. That's not Dan's fault that he didn't know that.
I'm not mad at Dan. I had an emotional reaction because of the lack of knowledge in every aspect of our society on that topic.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know until recently that that's how it works. I mean,
right. And I didn't always know that too. So I don't want to act like I'm better than anybody. It's just, I think Dan, and you just said it, now that you understand it more clearly, can you see how that is frustrating?
Yeah, especially for people who, like, we have to be very careful around Janelle's grandparents, right? Like, there was a time where, like, not a time, like all year, we didn't go into her house. We would put things on her front porch because we have to go to work and we're interacting with people and we're going camping, we're doing all sorts of stuff. So we just didn't go near her, right? Her daughter would extremely careful because she has to shop for her and things like that, right? So she didn't do anything or go anywhere at all, right? Because she had to take care of her mom and make sure her mom could have food. I completely understand that. And I think that's fine. And I think we need to protect our vulnerable population. But I think
in public, they should mandate a mask in public.
Sure. What? Fine. Fine. They should mandate a mask. I don't think the virus is. I'm not against them mandating masks. I don't think the virus is deadly enough.
But it's not just about death.
I don't think the virus is bad enough to warrant the mask we're wearing. the typical person is wearing is.
Dan, we
That's
just
the
had a
other thing that
come out-
bothers me is the mask that we're allowed to wear compared to the mask that, you know, people wear on job sites with the respirators and stuff like that. Huh? It's kind of a clown show.
But Dan, we just had a study that came out last week that showed that the states that have the mandated masks
Yes, the virus doesn't spread as fast.
have half the cases, or about half less than the states that don't have.
Can I say something super controversial?
In
Phil
one
might-
second. In one
Phil
second.
might disagree with me on that. I know the mask makes the states with the mask mandates lower.
So,
and
so
not
Dan,
as fast.
nobody don't have a false equivalency here that says the masks eliminate the virus. Nobody
Ryan, I understand that. I understand that.
minimizes it. Go
I
ahead.
understand that. If we hadn't done anything, we'd be done with COVID. If nothing had happened,
Yeah, with 2 million dead.
yeah, probably not 2 million people.
That's what
dead.
was the professional. That's what the professionals said. If we didn't do anything, no mask, no social distancing, no lockdown. 2
Yeah, I
million.
don't. Phil, is that accurate? We would have had 2 million dead
If we
Americans.
did nothing. Yes, I can show it
Well,
to
We
you.
had done nothing.
That's what some are saying. You know,
Do you
and
believe, Phil? Do you believe that? Do you believe we would have had 2 million dead
Man, we've had
Americans in the United States?
240,000 in 10 months.
Hold
Yeah,
on a
we've-
second, Ryan. Hold on a second. Go ahead.
well, I mean, we've had a 250,000, and so I don't think it would have been too difficult to get to 2 million if we had just let it do its thing. Because if you look at how many died in the Spanish flu in 1918, what was it, 50 million worldwide died, and so it's not hard to see how an unchecked virus can do, damage in the millions. So, I wouldn't have wanted to see that, but yeah.
Dan, I can't disagree with maybe it would be over, but it would be at an incredibly high cost. And also, we don't know how long this is going to last, right? So
Yeah,
that's,
I realize that. We have no. It could last. It's an indefinite. It's an indefinite lasting virus that with no solution. So we'll have these issues with this ongoing forever.
you're so cynical. You're so cynical.
I suspect this is going to become the new cold or the new flu. I have a feeling we're stuck with this seasonal, ongoing, and I think it's going to mutate, and I think we're going to mutate.
It already has.
I think our immune systems will change, and our, will change because of it, and I think it will become less deadly. Humans' history with infectious diseases have been the first time someone encounters it, it has a devastating effect. You look at all the diseases the Westerners brought to the New World, it wiped out entire tribes. It had horrible devastation. But, once it gets, once a pathogen gets settled into its environment, it seems to become less deadly. And I'm guessing that, COVID-19 might become the same thing.
Would you say the same thing about AIDS?
No, it's a completely different mechanism. It's a different virus. It acts differently.
Well, of course, but you said viruses once they're.
I mean, a virus is. We have
Are
other.
you talking about airborne? Are you just talking about airborne viruses?
Well, COVID-19 isn't the only COVID virus that we live with. The flu and the cold is a type of COVID virus. So this isn't. It's novel, but it's not completely, new. But in the sense and how it's, operates, but it's just more infectious. But I suspect it's going to become maybe less so as it settles into the population. But I'm not a scientist. I'm not,
No, it's just your opinion. Yeah.
Just my opinion.
Yeah, that's interesting. We got to wrap it up here shortly, but Dan, any parting shots?
Yeah, I think I think I'm right about the solutions we're going to be presented with for COVID. I think they're going to be more. Look, guys, we are all okay now with everything we do our emails, our telephone calls, our text messages. All that data, all your privacy data is collected, and we're perfectly fine with it. It's still illegal in most cases. We're fine with it, and we don't have any issues with it anymore, right? And we're going to adapt to all of this stuff we're doing now to the point where we're going to be perfectly fine with it, and we won't have any issues with it anymore. But I think it's still wrong. It's just down that slippery slope of our rights and freedoms being eroded. I read, which I should send to both of you, I read a few articles last year, which were very conspiratorial, talking about, literally talking about limiting people's travel, limiting people's access to, limiting people's ability to gather, right? Specifically talking about churches and stadiums and things like that. And in my mind, early last year, I was thinking, how in the world are they going to get to that? How are they going to get us to that? And lo and behold, in April, I'm like, oh my God, here we are, right? Here we are. And I'm telling you, like, this is our new Islamic terrorism. There's still a war on terror going on, which is the justification for our lack of privacy, right? That's the justification for it. I don't think anybody really thinks about that anymore, but hey, and I think this is going to turn into the same thing. Oh, there's limited, we're restricted in our traveling and our gathering together, but yeah, it's because of, COVID-19 12 years ago, right? And we'll just be fine with it. So those are my final thoughts.
Phil?
Yeah, I have some half-baked thoughts. I don't know if I want to try.
Throw it out there, Phil. Throw it out there.
Yeah, I share many of the similar concerns to Dan. Governments using disasters of whether they're natural or man-made to do certain things. And I guess my issues are not so much with privacy loss as just the general movement of wealth away from normal people and moving it towards the 1%. And we saw it in 2008, and we're seeing it again now. We've seen it in other points in time. And that's what concerns me is wealth inequality. It's not so much privacy, I guess it's more wealth inequality, because that's what really destabilizes civilizations is wealth inequality. The more inequality you have, the more instability you have, and that can bring down a democracy, it can bring down a dictatorship, it can bring down anything. And that's what really concerns me.
Can I add to that real quick? Because I agree with that. That is what is going to bring down the United States is the discrepancy in wealth. You're going to have people. I don't know how old Phil is, but I'm guessing he's in our generation. But people our generation and younger have realized they're not going to have the wealth that their parents had, and the younger, they're going to burn the place down. And if we think they're not, then we're kidding ourselves, right? They are going to be disenfranchised. They're not going to they're not going to have many options. And when they can't get a job at Pizza Hut because Pizza Hut is shut down because of various just silly reasons, they're going to school online and they're paying $80,000 to sit in front of a computer to listen to a lecture. Yeah, how long do you guys think that's going to last, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to fall apart.
Yeah, and let me add. That's great. Let me add a little bit onto that. Another thing that scares me is this disenfranchisement that we see amongst the young people. They're not getting mad at the ones that are disenfranchising them. They're adopting ideologies and getting radicalized in ways that joining groups like I don't the cancel culture and those that are kind of a part of Antifa and some of the Black Lives Matter, some of the social justice warriors, they're focusing their hatred on false injustices, imagined injustices. I'm not talking about racial injustices because those are real. I'm talking about imagined injustices.
Yeah.
So you're seeing
and
people.
you would say the right-wing groups as well, because
Yes.
white people
Yes.
feel that they're mistreated in this country too.
Yeah. Yes. So you're going to see.
It's imagined.
Yeah, you're going to see growth in white nationalism, imagined slights in white nationalism, and you're going to see imagined slights in the social justice, Antifa, that kind of kilt on the left, and what that's going to bring about is an unleashing of ideologies that I frankly that feel very brown shirt to me. Germany, 1929, 1930. That's where I feel like we almost are.
And who is their ire aimed at, Phil? Like, who are these people? Who is their ire aimed at? Because it's not the government. Who are they angry at? Right?
It's aimed at the right-wing groups, Dan.
No, it's aimed at anyone who has more wealth than they do. That's who their ire is aimed
We're
at.
getting into a whole nother topic, but Phil, I don't understand one thing that you said, because you said they're imagined slights. Wouldn't the fact that you can't have a one-income household anymore, you have $80,000 worth of student debt, and you can't afford a home as a millennial now, in most cases, aren't those real?
Yeah, those are the real slights. But what they're getting angry about is personal pronouns and how you what professors can talk at what universities, and it's silly. It's silly stuff. It's
what you can say, what you can't say, words that are harmful.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
like that, right?
Well,
Exactly.
The words can be very, very harmful and spark violence and things of that nature, but your point is understood. We're going to wrap it up here. I would like to add, as you guys know, I lived in Latin America for a time, and one thing that I saw there was incredible disparity between I like to say, and I don't want to judge the entire region, but in my experience, a huge difference between the very wealthy and the very poor. Like the middle class just really wasn't. I don't want to say it didn't exist, but like you just didn't see it very. Yeah, small. Very small. And I believe our country is going to turn into, the middle class is just going to keep shrinking, and you're going to have extremely wealthy and extremely poor, and we all know how that turns into. But I think
almost every big city in the United States already. Isn't that almost every large?
It depends if they're in the suburbs or in the city. I don't know. But no, Dan, I thank you very much for being here, and Phil, I thank you very much for being here, and hopefully we can do this again sometime. Okay.
Great. It was fun.
Right.
Yeah. You guys have a good night. All right.
All right. Thank you.
Need to get your number, Dan.
Yeah. All right. We'll talk later.
All right.
Bye.